Hi everyone. I wanted to take a second and open this video with a little bit of a explanation about things regarding this channel, about the videos that I'm making, and what to expect in the future. So if you have been watching this channel or you've seen any content on it, you would have seen the first video that I made about XLVI and early medieval Latin drama. And I made that video thinking that I would actually create a much larger series, expand upon the ideas that I lay out in that video, and kind of talk about medieval theater throughout the period that we know as the Middle Ages. But in thinking about this channel and thinking about what I want to do with it and the people that I wish to engage with, I thought that it might be better to actually explore different topics, different historical periods, different people, just broaden the content for larger audiences, for people who are just generally interested in theater and its history and its place in society throughout history. So that's kind of that's the idea behind this video and videos to come. Now, the medieval theater is my specialization and I love it. I could talk about it for forever, really. And if that's something you want to see more of, I would love to make more videos, and maybe I can create a particular playlist or something like that that is all about medieval theater, medieval drama, just theater in the Middle Ages. So I need feedback from you. I need to know what you think. I need to know if you like the videos that aren't just about the Middle Ages, or maybe you really love the videos about the Middle Ages. But please let me know. Drop some notes in the comments. Tell me what you want to see. Are there any particular just historical eras that you would like for me to explore in terms of the theatrical activity that was going on? Any particular societies, cultures, so on and so forth. I hope to get to a lot of different things over the course of this channel, but it's going to take me a little bit. But if there's something that a lot of people seem to want me to get to, then I'm going to work harder to make a video about that. So please communicate with me. Let me know what you think. But I just wanted to jump in here at the beginning of this video and let you know that things may be a little bit different than what you might expect if you just watch the first video in this Excavating Drama series. Nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the video. When I was in graduate school, I took a course on a method of historical investigation known as microhistory. It was a fascinating class and one of the first opportunities I had to explore primary sources, something every historian must learn how to do. Microhistories are intensely detailed investigations of people, places, or events that open a relatively small window onto an immense historical landscape. As the historian Charles Joyner puts it, microhistory is a way to ask, quote, big questions in small places. So today, the big question I want to ask is, what was it like to produce theater in the 19th century? It might not seem like an exciting question, but let's remember how quickly the world was changing in just the span of that one century. Steam engines drove new means of transportation and increased industrial manufacturing. Medicine became a scientific practice with advancements in germ theory and vaccinations, not to mention developments in anesthesia. The socioeconomic systems of the world were undergoing massive changes, giving some people a chance at a life they could have never imagined, while, at the same time, governments and organizations institutionalized the enslavement and oppressive labor of other peoples so that certain people could enjoy the new means of social advancement. Altogether, the world was changing at a pace never experienced before in the human story. Likewise, theater was changing. Technological advancements made it possible to do things on stage that had never been done before. The aesthetics of drama shifted toward portrayals of the common man in his struggle to tame the wilds of the world and bring civilization to new frontiers. Broadway and musical theater became a thing in the 19th century. But these are all examples of macro histories, the big and consequential happenings that contributed to the trajectory of theater over a particular period of time, providing a big picture history where the minute details are much harder to make out. So I want to investigate a particular individual in the London theater scene of the 19th century, a man named Samuel Lane. Lane was the proprietor of the Britannia Saloon and Theatre, which was located on High Street in Hoxton, a working-class section of East London. In 1879, Charles Dickens Jr. wrote that the Britannia was, quote, an unusually well-built theater, and apart from any critical estimate of the performances, one of the sights which a visitor should on no account miss seeing. And although Dickens Jr. went on to say that, quote, the performances are, of course, not of the West End type, they are almost always good of their kind. Unfortunately, Samuel Lane didn't live to read about the respectable position his theater held in Hoxton. He died in 1871, and his wife, Sally Lane, had continued to build upon the legacy that Samuel had worked so hard to establish amongst his community in London. Thanks to her efforts, the Britannia had grown into one of the most popular gathering spots for the residents of the Hackney Borough to unwind and catch a show, a trademark of Samuel Lane's theatrical proprietorship since his earliest days in London. Samuel, Sarah, and the Britannia Theatre left a lasting theatrical legacy for East London, one that at times rivaled even the best West End theatres, but didn't start there for Samuel. When he first came to London from Devonshire in the early 1830s, there were numerous laws and restrictions on theatrical activity that had been in place for nearly a century, resulting in a monopoly, a theatrical monopoly held by just a handful of theaters in the West End and their well-connected managers. The British government had severely restricted the number of theaters allowed to perform serious or spoken dramas to only those that held a royal patent. And in 1830, there were less than 10 of them in the whole of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Furthermore, theaters that wished to present more fanciful fare, like pantomimes, variety shows, and comedies, still had to receive a license in order to charge a ticket price for their entertainment. These licenses were incredibly hard to come by since the Licensing Act of 1737, which had increased censorship of plays under the office of the Examiner of Plays, and generally made producing theatrical work of any kind a challenging prospect. Nevertheless, Samuel and his first wife, Mary, were bound and determined to find a way to provide theatrical entertainment for the hard-working, thirsty patrons of their neighborhood. Sometime after 1834, Samuel had taken over operation of the Royal Union Saloon in Shoreditch and took to offering a variety of entertainments for his patrons. During his proprietorship of the Royal Union Saloon, Samuel had come to be recognized, according to one neighborhood periodical, as, quote, a respectable publican. But Samuel Lane was operating an unlicensed theater within the Royal Union Saloon. Like many of his fellow publicans in the working-class neighborhoods of industrial London, the Beer House Act of 1830 made beer significantly cheaper and increased competition amongst pubs and saloons. Offering entertainment alongside a good brew was crucial to getting patrons in the door. Lee Jackson's book, Palaces of Pleasure, From Music Halls to the Seaside to Football, How the Victorians Invented Mass Entertainment, explains how saloon theaters of the 1830s, like Lane's Royal Union Saloon, often included a stage in an adjoined concert room where backdrops and crude lighting could be erected for a variety of light performances, including comic sketches, singing, dancing, talent acts, magicians, and more. They would serve to entertain audiences as they continued to imbibe whatever was on tap. But should we consider such entertainments theater? It may not seem like an important question now, but in Victorian London, only a licensed theater could charge a ticket price for such entertainments, and according to one magistrate, Publicans like Samuel Lane, quote, have smuggled all sorts of entertainments into public houses under the guise of a little music. The Metropolitan Police Act of 1839 set out to give the police more authority to put a stop to activities at unlicensed theaters. Specifically, the act stated that police would be authorized, quote, to enter into any house or room kept and take or used within the said district for stage plays or dramatic entertainments into which admission is obtained by payment of money, and which is not a licensed theater, at any time when the same shall be open for the reception of persons resorting thereto, and to take into custody all persons who shall be found therein without lawful excuse. Punishments were set at £20 or up to 2 months' imprisonment. That brings us to the events of September 9th, 1839, which were recorded in at least 4 local journals and newspapers: the Champion and Weekly Herald, the Charter, the Examiner, and the Morning Chronicle. On that particular date, Samuel and Mary Lane were offering a night of entertainment at the Royal High Saloon, with 2 musical shows entitled The Jolly Tar and Old and Young. From the newspaper accounts and court records, we know that right in the middle of a scene of sailors in the Jolly Tar, the police stopped the show and arrested around 70 people. According to the Champion and Weekly Herald and the Morning Chronicle, a witness stated that the police were far too forceful in their actions, creating a panic that caused several gallons of beer to capsize and fall upon Mrs. Lane. What's worse is that Mary Lane had to remain in her beer-soaked clothing all night until all were brought before the magistrate. Mary Lane, along with the actors William Henry Freeman, his wife and son, Harriet Britton, Anne and Ellen Cashney, Charles Buller, William Beals, Edward Wayne, and Rebecca Maxwell, and several audience members were all found to have violated the law against charging admission for the performance of dramatic entertainment. Most of them were given fines ranging from 1 shilling for the actors and patrons to 40 shillings for Mrs. Lane. And all were represented by the solicitor, Mr. Adolphus, who railed to the Examiner against the injustice of arresting and convicting members of the community simply for want of an evening's entertainment. The Examiner also explained that, upon their release, several supporters received the convicted party with, quote, deafening acclamations. But the charge against Samuel Lane was far more serious, and so he was presented to a different magistrate for operating an unlicensed theater. You see, the legal question at the heart of Lane's case dealt with the interpretation of the Licensing Act of 1737 and whether it gave the police enough cause under the Metropolitan Police Act of 1839 to enter the Royal Union Saloon and make arrests. Remember, according to that act, police could put a stop to any unlicensed theater that was charging admission for their entertainment. But the Lanes, like many other proprietors of saloons and beer halls, were charging 4 pence for a ticket that entitled the ticket holder to a pint of ale, with the implication that the show was a free event. Although the magistrate for Mary Lane and the other defendants had determined that an admission fee was certainly charged for the entertainment, the magistrate overseeing Samuel Lane's case felt that the evidence was not strong enough to convict him. Furthermore, that magistrate cited overwhelming support from parish trustees, community leaders, and other citizens of the neighborhood who spoke to the character of Samuel Lane and the reputation of his establishment. On those grounds, the magistrate allowed Lane to go without a charge, a decision that was apparently met with great delight amongst the multiple supporters of Samuel Lane. Regardless of whether or not the Lanes were charging money for a ticket that entitled you to a show, a beer, or both, the demand for theatrical entertainment amongst the working class neighborhoods of Victorian London was a robust and lucrative opportunity for performers and proprietors alike. But the laws against theater and theater spaces were purposefully designed to limit the kinds of people who could access as well as create theater in England. Samuel Lane's case places significant focus on the accessibility of theater for the working class neighborhoods of London. Only a month after the events of September 9th, Mr. Adolphus, appeared before the court at Sessions House on Clerkwell Green of Middlesex County to apply for a theater license on behalf of Charles Robinson, the manager of the neighboring Royal Standard in Bethnal Green. It was licensing day, when every individual who wished to renew or apply for a new theater license had to present themselves and their case before the court. The newspaper The Era recorded the proceedings for the day, stating that of the 72 individuals renewing their licenses, all were granted. But those applying for a new license had a much more difficult time, especially Robinson. When Mr. Adolphus presented the court with Robinson's petition for a license and its support amongst community leaders, he was quickly reminded of the incident involving Samuel Lane in the Royal Union Saloon. Mr. Adolphus tried to avoid the criticism, citing Lane's acquittal, and pushed for the importance of a licensed venue of theatrical entertainment within that part of Greater London. Unfortunately, the court did not find the area to be particularly well suited for such entertainment and denied the petition. Out of 33 applications for new licenses, only 5 were granted. And it just so happens that Mr. John Nash Crowder was one of the 5 individuals granted a new license for his theater, a theater which he named the Britannia of Hoxton. Only a few years later, in 1841, Lane was the owner-operator of the Britannia and its status as a licensed theater. But despite the early offerings, Lane ran into financial trouble. To pile on, his renewal of the theatrical license for the Britannia was denied in 1843. According to the Examiner, his management of the Royal Union Saloon had come back to haunt him. So, Lane returned to the very same practice that got him in trouble in the first place, charging a ticket price for beer that was also conveniently served as an entrance into the night's entertainment. But in August of 1843, Lane and the Britannia would be granted a reprieve from all-out financial ruin. The Theatres Act of 1843 allowed local authorities more power in licensing theaters and encouraged them to provide licenses for public houses and beer halls. The Britannia was granted license and never again had to worry about police shutting down the operation or about creative ticketing schemes as a way to subvert the law. Unfortunately, Mary Lane died from a fall in 1843 and never got to see the heights that the Britannia would reach. Samuel Lane regularly hired an acting company to present shows for the Britannia and eventually married one of the actresses of the company, Sarah Sally Barrow. The Britannia increasingly became one of East London's most popular theaters under Sally's management. But its popularity was largely a result of Samuel Lane's proprietorship, a man of the people who sought to offer a space for the people. Lane even offered up the Britannia for political rallies that championed the causes of working-class Londoners. Lane died in 1871, and Sally successfully continued the work of enshrining the Britannia as a theater dedicated to the audiences of East London, becoming a theater impresario in her own right. So, in the spirit of that patriotic song, Rule Britannia, I'd like to propose something I'm calling the Britannia Rule for historians everywhere. Don't neglect the small theaters, their audiences, and those productions that provided a place for people to break away from their everyday struggles. Theaters like the Britannia were successful not because they hired the best actors or put on the biggest shows. They were successful because they were pillars of their communities, spaces where you could have a much-needed beer and enjoy an entertaining show after a long day of work, where you could laugh with your friends at the sight of hard-working local actors doing a ridiculous song and dance to everyone's favorite tune. These weren't just saloons with stages attached. No, theaters like the Britannia were their community's Broadways. And that's how we should remember them. Britannia Rule. I'm Kyle A. Thomas, the theater history professor. Thanks for watching.